Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of PLA with myself, Nick, and Bruno. We've got three questions today. We're going to jump straight into the first one with yourself, Bruno. This one is just regarding, obviously, estate planning. So what we have, guys, we've got basically a situation where an individual basically owns properties and shares. They now want to begin the journey of estate planning around their portfolio, but they've got quite a very common question that we always receive, which is regarding costs, and that is what are basically some of the costs to look at when one is basically moving properties and shares into other trusts and companies. Bruno?
So estate planning is crucial, especially when it comes to property investors or any kind of property owner. And I say this repetitively because the value of the property is always quite high. So your estate planning becomes difficult if you later on try and move assets from different structures when you should have initially been doing it. So estate planning needs to be something that you do from the onset. But occasionally we do find clients that approach us after the fact to say that they'd bought properties, say in a company, or bought it in their personal names, and now they're looking to move these properties across into some sort of estate planning structure that they've created for themselves. Now, these estate planning structures you often find in the property space. It is very common and very popular to have structures that include some form of trust, South African trust, and this especially for South African residents, where trust is a great estate planning vehicle. Now, to move, the first thing that a person needs to bear in mind is that a trust is basically a different person, a separate individual altogether. So you moving things over into a trust structure, and when I say structure, I mean a structure that at least has the trust at the top, whichever way the rest of the structure appears, there is at least a trust somewhere in that structure. So trying to move it into that structure is almost like giving your property away to another individual. Now, yes, because the trust is founded by you, because you're a trustee of a trust, and because it's your beneficiaries that are benefiting from the trust, sure, you've got a level of control on how the proceeds or how the benefits are to be distributed, but make no mistake, this trust is not supposed to be your alter ego. In fact, if it is your alter ego, the trust will be dissolved by a court, or as they call it, pierce the corporate veil, which basically means that the courts will ignore that the trust even exists. So it has to be administered properly, it has to be run properly for the benefit of the beneficiaries, not just yourself. So insofar as costs are concerned, and we can keep discussing this if there are questions around this, please let me have your questions and we can answer it week by week. But in short, because you're transferring your assets to a completely new vehicle, new person, new entity, you have to almost treat it like you're the same way that you'd sell it to anyone else. And this carries consequences. And these consequences, if it's a trust structure, mind you, these consequences obviously are an accumulation of taxes and costs. If you're moving a property, normally the same amount that you've paid to have the property transferred into your name will be the amount that you now be liable for. The transfer duty, same thing. If you were liable to pay transfer duty, it's very likely that you'd have to pay transfer duty again in order to move the property into this investment structure. Capital gains tax is also another big one. If you acquired the property for a relatively low amount and now it carries a very high value, there might be a tax component between these two values that have to be paid. And finally, if within your trust structure, you're actually applying for a bond in order to be able to finance the purchase of this property, remember, donating a property is probably going to cost you a lot more when it comes to tax. So typically, people try to finance a sale where they buy it into the investment structure, but there is a bond over it, and then there's normally bond registration fees, because again, it's a new person, so it's a new bond. Now, there are ways to work around some of these costs, to reduce these costs, to mitigate, and all legitimate. It just takes some calculations. But this is the overview at a high level on what one could anticipate paying when doing what we call an asset transfer.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you very much there, Bruno. Certainly much valuable information. We'll be delving obviously much deeper into estate planning and trust and companies, as obviously this structuring forms a very important part when one actually does invest in property as a professional. Right. Thank